Good afternoon. If I could get everybody to have a seat, resume, we'll finish this up. It's been such a great day. We've had so many great presentations, and I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our final one of the day. This is Kim Ositis. Kim is a graduate of University of Washington, the MLIS program, as am I, though you wouldn't know it by my saying that. She has been a reference services librarian at the Public Law Library of King County since 2001, many, many years there. She's also maintains the library's website. The reason I got in touch with Kim, though, is because she and her colleagues teach numerous classes at the law library. They teach classes on a wide variety of topics such as e-filing, legal research for the non-attorney, searching Lexis and Westlaw, and my favorite, hiding your trail, smart online sleuthing. Kim teaches these classes to attorneys, pro ses, investigators, public librarians, and state agency employees. Please help me in welcoming Kim.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come speak at WestPac. I always have to give a shout out to that while I did get my degree in law library in the librarianship from here, I am in my heart a duck. So, I know, I should be conflicted, but I'm not. Okay, so I always like to start with my presentations with caveats because I work with attorneys, you know. So I am not a professional investigator. Professionally, I don't have any licensing or professional training in that particular area. I just happen to really enjoy this area of study. And all of the websites that we're going to be visiting today are completely legal. They're all free. If you've never done a lot of this research, some of it may seem a bit unsavory, but it is, I guarantee you, we're not breaking the law by going anywhere that we're going to look. And I know that not everybody is from Washington, so some apologies. Many of my resources are Washington specific because most of the people who attend are from Washington, but a lot of the strategies that I talk about will work across multiple states. So my apologies if not everything is 100% applicable to your work. Just by a quick show of hands, who does any sort of training either in-house or out on these types of topics? Online sleuthing? Okay, excellent. So this is part of a much larger class that we've been teaching since 2004 at least. It's by far the most popular class we teach in the library. The first thing I always suggest folks do is to have a checklist or a journal or something to that effect. This is just one example. The idea being that once you start opening up windows in your browser, pretty soon you're going to have 10 or 20 windows open and you'll forget, where did I find that email? Where was that phone number? And so if you keep track of where you've been and what you found as you go along, it's a really good strategy. Also, because I work with a lot of people who are actively in firms, they're doing things like due diligence for permission to serve by publication, and they need to be able to show the judge that they did indeed try to find the person. And so having a journal is a great strategy. So on that journal or checklist, you want to start by writing down everything you know about the subject, even if you suspect that it might not be quite right, because you can always go back and change it. And then as you learn more information like alias, names, that kind of thing, you're going to add that information in. Now, a good starting point is an online Yellow Pages, White Pages directory kind of thing. Now, I used to be able to show you whitepages.com and it would show complete addresses. And unfortunately, I don't show that anymore because it's now been bought up by an information broker and it does not give you anything for free. And you'll get the idea that we really like free around here. So I'm very annoyed and frustrated, but not too surprised because that's kind of the way these things work. Sometimes you'll have an open source sleuthing resource that works one week and then the next week it's useless. So my new favorite that I like right now is a website called people.com. Now the UW Gateway is not allowing me to go out to it, but on this site it does kind of a meta search across a bunch of different information brokers. Some of them are going to give you a lot of information for free. Others are just going to give you little tidbits. But in a couple of the names that I regularly use for my sleuthing because we don't call it stalking, because that's illegal, I was able to get good information that I knew was correct because I had verified it in other places. So consider using people.com as one of your starting points. Now, has anybody used Reference USA? Okay, so Reference USA is something that's available through, here in Seattle, through the Seattle Public Library System and the King County Library System. And I was really impressed with what I was able to find, complete addresses, phone numbers when they were available, the ability to search by as close in as 1/10 of a mile to the person that you're looking for. So you can say, for example, you're trying to see who lives in an apartment building, and it will show you addresses and apartment numbers. So check with your library system to see if they have access to Reference USA. Now I know that everybody has access to a lot of different types of paid databases. Some have the Cadillac, and some people have nothing. So I tend to go lowest common denominator and don't make any assumptions about anybody having any sort of paid access. So that's why I try and talk about things that anybody could get to, or they could get to with a minimal amount of effort, like going through your public library system. And then also part of Reference USA is it provides an interesting little lifestyles thing. So they're obviously getting this from things like magazine subscriptions, and it will tell you if they like outdoor pursuits or if they're a catalog shopper, that kind of thing, which I thought was really interesting. Now, paid databases, as I said, the library doesn't have access to any of these types of paid databases. But I find that they can be very good as a starting point, because even though we're not going to go any farther with Intellius, it's giving us a lot of good information for free. So Tim Iman, the non-Washington folks might not know who that is. He is our local initiative guru. Nobody seems to mind that I use him as my guinea pig for searching. He's not particularly popular, so I use him. So here it's giving me for free suggestions on places that he might have lived, aliases, a relative, places that he's worked. So without even having to pay for the next level of report, which they would gladly sell me, I've got some good information that I could add to my checklist. Another website that's similar to that I like using is called advancedbackgroundchecks.com. Same idea. They'll gladly sell you a full background report, but you can get a lot of good information for free, especially because they tend to show you who their associates and relatives are. And when you're working with a name that's maybe a little bit common and you don't have something like a middle name or a middle initial, it's helpful to see who the relatives are possibly, because that can help you to eliminate false positives. So I like advanced background checks as another starting point. Now in Washington, voter records are public information. Not everybody realizes this, and sometimes this can really freak people out. So again, my apologies in advance if you've not seen this before. Now this is the Washington voter database. It's online. Unfortunately, the site that has maintained this for a very long time is no longer keeping it up to date, which is sadness. But it's not all bad. If you look at it, it says it hasn't been updated since February 29th of 2012. What happens is that the Secretary of State once a month puts out a data dump, basically. Now you can online request the CD and they'll send it to you for free. I tried that out just because I was curious, because this website's no longer being updated, and it was good that I got current data, but they provide you the raw data with a file that is so large that I had to open it in Notepad, get a cup of coffee, after I ran my Control F search, super sophisticated, and then come back. So it's not at all easy to use, but the current information is there for free. You don't have to pay, but you do have to request it every single month if you want the most current information. But the website is still a good resource because of the information it gives you are things that are not going to change. Now you can search this in a couple of different ways. You can search by first name, last name, and this is nice because you don't have to know where the person lives. You can just check to see if they're registered. So here we see Tim. Sorry. Let's try that again. There's Tim, and the jewel of this website is that it gives you full birth dates. So even if the address information is wrong, that's okay because you have your the full birth date. And with full birth dates, that opens up access to many other different resources. It also shows you almost all of the address, but then they truncate the last digit, either an O or an E for odd or even. Well, there's really only so many single-digit odd or even numbers. You can usually figure it out. Plus, once you start to add in things like Google Maps, property databases, you can usually figure this out. And the CD that you get from the Secretary of State, those addresses are not truncated, and they do include apartment numbers. So if you're running into a dead end with this website here, and you specifically need to get that last digit or an apartment number, go ahead and request the CD. Just to know that the data is going to be a little bit bulky to work with. But you can click on the house number, and it shows you who else lives there. So we have Karen, and I'm going to make the great leap that that's his wife. And this is really cool because you can see who the other voters are. It can also help you to figure out relationships because a lot of times adult children who are in their 20s or so, they were registered at home with mom and dad, and then they've moved out, but they haven't changed their address necessarily. So the data that's there can be very helpful to kind of figure out who's the sons and the daughters, who's the dads, who's the grandparents kind of thing. Sometimes you can see as many as 3 or 4 generations that are all in one address. So I really like the voter database. It's one of my favorites. I just wish that the folks who were running the Sound Politics blog would keep it up to date. And also I should have said at the beginning, I have the resources electronically. I will send them to Bonnie, and then I heard tell that you all might get them via email later on, and we'll have clickable links in the PDF. So, and all the websites that I'm visiting are in the materials, so you don't have to be taking any frantic notes of URLs, because who's got time for that? Okay. So birthdatabase.com is another site that I like. And it's kind of typical of this type of thing. They say they get their information from public records, but they don't necessarily say where. It's one of the few places that I found that also lists the birthplace. So when I look up Tim, we see his full birth date and his birthplace in Yakima, Washington. But when I search for myself, I don't exist. I know I was born. And I searched on all my different variants of last names, and I don't exist. So that's, while frustrating, is not particularly that unusual for this type of site. That's why you have to know about so many. My larger skip tracing class materials are like 12 pages long, and that was when I pared it down from 20. So there are a ton of these types of sites, and I'm just showing you a few of my favorites. Now let's say you want to know about things like marriages, death, and property. Washington, again, has a really awesome resource called the Washington Digital Archives, and you can search this site by a lot of different ways, and I'm going to show you one example. You can search across all of the resources, or you can limit it to one collection, and in this case I'm going to limit it to death records, and we'll see, this is my husband's spinster aunt, and it helps to have a unique last name when you're doing this kind of search. And we can see here that it shows us when she was born, when she died, and her social security number. Now, social security numbers are, of course, private when the person is alive, but once they have been reported as to the Social Security Administration, they are public, and you can search them. Now, this site does not allow you to search by the Social Security number itself. There are a couple out there that do, but this one does not. But it can be useful even when you're looking for people who are alive, Because if you are, again, sleuthing, not stalking, them on social media, and they may make a mention of, Great Aunt Gertrude died and I'm going to her memorial. So you can look up Great Aunt Gertrude, figure out where she died, and then you could look in that city's obituaries and figure out where the memorial service is being held. And that might be of use to your process server, perchance. So I did mention unsavory, yes? Genealogical stuff can be a really good resource because, again, sometimes the information you have that's really good is maybe a generation away from the person. Like, I know it's this guy and he's got this Uncle Johnny that I know a lot about, but I'm not so sure about him. So if you can kind of work backwards through relatives, that can be a really good thing. And also the obituaries themselves will include things like who the surviving family members are, where they live, that kind of thing. So it can be an excellent resource. And the death index is just one. They have property records, marriage records. The one thing I would say, this site tends to be a little bit better for slightly older records. You'd want to check the scope for the particular database. So for example, King County, after about 2000 or so, they stopped submitting their marriage certificates to this database, and you have to go through the recorder's office. So it's always a good idea to check the scope notes of the database to be sure that you're not searching for something that's actually not there. Yes?
Are there divorce records in that one?
Yes and no. So in the digital archives is access to Superior Court records from 3 different counties. Chelan and 2 of the others escape me. Now you can't look at the data directly, the scanned in images, but you can do keyword searches against it. And it's actually really darn cool because you can actually search by the keywords that might actually have appeared within a description of the document, which is more than you can do with a lot of the things like ECR, which is a King County product, or Links, which is a Pierce County product. It actually allows you to do more searching. So if you're looking for a type of document, and then you pay to see the records. So for those 3 counties, you can do some searching. But again, it's going to be limited by the date range of whatever they've submitted. Now, again, apologies, it's King County centric. So in King County, we have access to a really awesome resource called the Parcel Viewer. Now, this resource allows you to do, there we go, searching by address, by street intersection, by parcel number. And the cool thing about this particular resource, it's a lot of cool things, is that it brings together information from a bunch of different county departments all into one spot. And so now you can't search it by property owner's name, but I will show you in a moment how you can work around that. I used this product, or the first generation of this product, a few years ago with a patron who was going through a divorce, and she suspected that the estranged spouse was hiding a piece of property that hadn't been declared. And so she didn't know the address, but she knew the approximate street intersection. And so by using this product, we were able to zoom in and identify the parcel that she thought might belong, and it did indeed, that the husband was the taxpayer on the parcel. So this particular parcel belongs to our neighborhood multi-billionaire. This is the Gates residence. Now you know you're doing pretty well in the world when they name your house in the property records. So it's being a little cranky with me, so I won't go any farther, but basically this would put you into property tax information. $1 million a year is how much you pay. It's a description of the house, the parcel number. And I would say this would be useful in any sort of property research where you have an assessor taking a picture that's made public. Oftentimes the pictures that the assessors take are from a standpoint that you couldn't get to. Now because I'm not a PI, I wouldn't do any sort of in-person surveillance. But But the assessor's pictures on these property research lookups are often taken like from the driveway of a property. Now, you may not be able to get to that driveway, and so that picture may be a better tool than you could get yourself, either physically, or wouldn't feel comfortable getting that close. So consider that a tool. I know one of my students used the assessor's picture to be able to zoom in on a pickup that was parked in the driveway of a business, and by looking up the plate number, he was able to figure out who actually owned the business. So that's a tip for these types of property research database, and that's going to be relevant regardless of the county that's providing the data.
Google Street View is also good for that very same reason.
Except that they've now started to blur the license plates on that's fairly new. So which is great from a privacy standpoint, but from an investigative standpoint, it's darn annoying because yes, you used to be able to zoom in on the plate numbers in order to see, what was parked in front of a business or a house or something, and you can't do that anymore. At least that's their goal. They may not get every single plate, but they definitely seem to get most of the ones I've tried to find. Now, I mentioned that you can't search this parcel viewer by property owner's name, but what you can do is you can go to something like a recorder's office search, and probably any county that's of a decent size is going to have something like this. And then you can search by a taxpayer's name, and then you can find the property documents, and then you can look up either the parcel number or the address from the documents, deeds of trusts, mortgages, that kind of thing, and then you can look those up in your parcel viewer or equivalent database. So that's one way you can work around this. Now, I don't have it in the presentation, but I'll mention the property database Zillow, ZILLOW.com, and people may be familiar with this from a real estate perspective in terms of looking for houses to buy. The awesome thing about Zillow is that it lists properties even if they are not on the market. And if they come from a county that has online property records, you can look up the property and then they will link back to that county's online property database. So you don't have to do a bajillion Google searches to be like, I wonder if Tallahassee, Florida has online property records. It doesn't matter. You look up the address in Zillow, and if they have accessible online property records, you'll know that because the description that Zillow provides will handily link you back into the property database that the county provided. So I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so did anybody used to use Google News when it didn't suck? Yeah. This is a sadness. It used to be awesome. It had this great archive that you could go back and search, and they took it away. It's so annoying. So here is an example. This is the gentleman Samuel R.B. Harris. Now, in the history, the pantheon of criminals, he's not doing so good. He and an accomplice broke into the Esquin wine storage facility south of the stadiums and proceeded to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars in wine. And they blacked out the security cameras, but not all of them. And the property owner was able to recognize him because he had been a customer of the shop. They also tried to burn down the building unsuccessfully. So they arrested him, and when they were doing their searches, they discovered that he had a notebook in which there was a page titled The Plan. Yeah. So anyway, he is one of my favorite searching guinea pigs. So when I do a news.google.com's phrased search on Samuel R.B. Harris, I get 0 hits, which I know is wrong. Because when I do it as a phrase search in the total web, I get 10,000 hits. So this is an example of why you shouldn't rely on the Google News search anymore, because it doesn't work. Instead, I've found a couple of replacements. This is yougotthenews.com, and when I do my same phrased search, I get 5 hits, and they're actually from news organizations. Whoa. There's also, online newsstand things through your local public library, ProQuest databases, all that stuff. So just be careful if you used to use the news feature on Google just be really suspicious because it's not giving you everything that used to be out there. Another one of my favorites is smalltownpapers.com. So this is exactly what it sounds like. It's 250 plus papers from small towns around the country. A lot of them don't even have a website for their newspaper directly, but they submit them to this repository that scans them. And then you can do keyword searches against those scans. Because a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm absconding from justice, so I'll go live in a little small town. And that's actually a bad strategy because people in small towns tend to gossip a lot about things. So you can find, the local gossip column, who's been sick, who's visiting, who came for Thanksgiving, marriages, births, all that kind of stuff, and can all be keyword searched through this website. So if you know the person is living in a town that has coverage in this particular website, this is your new best friend, and it used to be part of the Google archive, but it is not anymore as far as I can tell, or at least not consistently. So consider using smalltownpapers.com. Now, criminal history. And this one is good because it's applicable outside of Washington, even though my example is going to be Washington specific. So most Department of Corrections out there provide an inmate lookup. I like this one in particular because it provides you, at least Washington's Department of Corrections doesn't provide you nearly the same amount of information that this particular website does. So you go in and you search by the offender. And in this case, we're going to use Gary Ridgway, which Green River Killer, that's his name. No, it's not his name, that's how everybody knows him. And what's cool about this site is that if you're searching for someone with a common Joe Smith kind of name, it has an age range pull down, so you can limit the results to a range of ages, or if you know the person's birthday specifically, you can enter that in as well. And then once we pull this up, we have a complete birth date, an age, race, gender, and a custody status, and aliases. Anytime you see alias information, you want to write that down on your checklist and then go back and run those names again through some of the same places you were at before to see if something different pops under the alias name that you didn't get under the original name that you had. So criminal records are an excellent resource for getting things like complete names and birth dates, because obviously they don't want to screw that up. So they will often show you the birth date information, whereas other places may not. So I really like this FindLink website. The actual purpose of the website is victim notification. So crime victims can sign up to be notified in advance when an offender has a custody move coming up, either to a new facility or being released into the community. So that's its main purpose, but its secondary purpose is quite nice for the investigator because it releases all this information. Okay, next up. Now this is the National Sex Offender Search. Now, pretty much every jurisdiction has a sex offender search of some sort. I like this one because it allows you to search across the entire country. Now there's very few countrywide searches of any kind that aren't pay. So if you don't know where the person is, but you know they're a sex offender and wherever they are, they need to be registering, you can do this search here and searches across the entire country. So you could do a first and last name search, or you could search by location. Now this is another one of those ones where you have to give some information, fill in one of those CAPTCHA thingies. Now if you've never done this kind of search, you may have wished that you just lived in blissful ignorance. But let's say you decide to be brave and you go ahead and search. Now I entered 98104, which is the zip code for the courthouse where I work. We also happen to be the sex offender registration point because there's a sheriff's office there. So we get a lot of people, especially those who are transient. And so when you pull up a record for someone, provides you with a picture. Now, pictures are very powerful when it comes to doing this kind of sleuthing because that can help you to narrow down, yes, I know this looks exactly like the person I'm looking for. I'm like, oh no. Or it could be this is totally not the person. Even though the name matches, I know it's not the right person. And this gives us aliases. It gives us a name, identifying characteristics, and it even gives you a handy link into the statute that they violated. So I like this as a sleuthing resource. And again, because it has that nationwide coverage, it's really nice. Now, this is the most wanted program through the Department of Child Support, and a lot of agencies are going to have something similar to this. So what this does is for non-custodial parents who are not in compliance with their child support obligations, the custodial parent can give permission to have their name and identifying information posted on this website. And then they release a lot of information. So we've got a picture, a birth year, height, weight. What I thought was really interesting is an occupation. And sometimes that occupation can be helpful to add to your list, other info. So this is another resource. And sometimes the backgrounding you're doing is not so much where is the person, but more, is this a person we want to hire? Or is this a person I want to rent to kind of question? So knowing this kind of backgrounding is an important thing to know.
I have a question.
Yes.
How good is Smoking Gun in its coverage? And also, are there commercial mugshot sites, or where do they get all these mugshots from?
The Smoking Gun definitely has interesting things on it. I've used it in the past, not all the time. I think it just depends on the profile of the person they're covering. Higher profile people are going to be more likely to have stuff on Smoking Gun. If you're not familiar with that, it's just like what it says. It's smokinggun.com, and they do all sorts of really interesting things, including investigative scoops, basically, that people have submitted paperwork and things. I mean, you'd have to be a little bit careful because some of the stuff that they may provide might not have been given to them in the most lawful fashion. But it's going to depend on the person that they're covering. And then in terms of commercial mugshot, it's going to depend on the agency that takes the mugshot. I know there's some Oregon agencies that release mugshots just to anybody. So it's going to depend. Washington, at least in King County, doesn't do that. They don't put them out publicly. So it's going to depend on whether the agency itself provides the mugshot just on a regular basis, or whether it's something that has to be requested. So it's going to depend.
And I think Oregon passed a law, I'm not sure, it had to do with the time limit. You can do that mugshot online and you have to take it off. That's why I had someone else's caption.
Yeah, and there have been some stories of people who've been basically held hostage because their mugshot showed up on a commercial website that got linked to their name, and then they tried to extort money from the person to get the mugshot down. So that's a concern as well. So courts information, I'll go through this quickly since you probably already know this. Just in case, say for example, your Pacer access blows up and you can't get to it, I just want to let you know about a website called Recap the Law. And what it is it's a Firefox extension, and people who are Pacer subscribers and have Recap installed, when they go out to Pacer and they decide to purchase a document, that the extension automatically takes that document and it pushes it up to an archive. You can search the archive for free. So it's a pretty cool tool. So you get free Pacer documents, and you can search the archive without having to be a Firefox user, because I know that not everybody's allowed to use alternative browsers. So it's a good resource to know about. Of course, Washington State court records. We are very lucky in Washington to have very robust access to court records online. Not every state has that. So in Washington, you can search by name across the entire state. I would only say that Seattle Municipal Court is its own beast, and they don't have the greatest coverage in the court records. And I'm going to show you how to search their website and a couple of little tricks that you might not have known about in a bit. But we're really lucky to have coverage, as we do, through Washington State Court's records. So Pierce County, they have a system called Links. Now I really liked Links even before their trainer came and taught a class for us. But after the trainer left, I liked Links even more. It's just awesome. It gives you a lot of stuff for free. It's easy to use. It has everything Pierce County in one spot, whereas King County, you have to have like 5 different logons to get anything. And they have this really nifty sleuthing thing. So here's an example. So LaTanya Clemens was one of the co-defendants in the 2009 Lakewood officer shooting trial. There were 4 officers who were gunned down in a coffee shop outside of Lakewood, Washington. She was one of the co-defendants. Her convictions were overturned on appeal. But what's interesting is the links information that this provides. All the way down at the very bottom is co-defendants. So if you're sleuthing for friends and associates, knowing who someone's co-defendants were on a criminal case could be a very important thing to know, because what do friends and family do? To go and commit crimes together. So if you suspect that someone is surfing on a couch, this would be a legitimate place to look to see if they might have been involved in a criminal case in the past and who their co-defendants might have been, and that gives you more names to search on. So this is just one of the reasons why I really like the Links product. Now, Seattle Municipal Court records. I mentioned that the coverage is not that great on the court's website, so you really should search it directly. As of June 24th of 2014, they have published a new service, free online full text access to Seattle Municipal Court cases. Wow, that's really exciting. It doesn't display on Firefox very well, so you have to use IE. That would be the only thing. So if you have to do Seattle Muni Court research, remember that they have this new system. But what I'm going to show you is ways that you can work around the Washington State Department of Licensing. Because what can happen is if you've got a license plate number and you want to know more about it, typically you'd have to submit a request to the Department of Licensing saying, I want you to pull, give me information about this license plate number. And then depending on the industry type, that subject would be advised that you've requested that information. Now, depending on the situation, that might be a big deal or it might not. But let's say you don't even want to worry about it. So this is a way you can work around it. If you have the plate number and the stars are aligned and it was involved in a case in Seattle Municipal Court, we did 5 clicks in about 10 seconds, or even less than that. We've now gone from a plate number, which was OSITI, which is the vanity plate for my husband's car, because this is his penance for ignoring carpool-only signs. We now know his full name, Michael R. Ositis, and his date of birth, and if he had any aliases, that would all be listed there. So now we've gone from a plate number to a full name and a birth date and any alias information in 5 seconds and 5 clicks. And you can also go the other direction. If you pull up a defendant name and you're like, I wonder what kind of cars they might drive, you can enter them in here. Case number, citations. Oh, looky, there's a vehicle. So now we have the vehicle. We know that it's a 2002 Honda Odyssey that is silver. That's a lot of information. It was free, it was fast. Now, this is not always going to work, obviously, but Seattle writes a lot of tickets, and it was free, and it took like a minute. So it's definitely worth it to check to see if your subject might show up in this system. There are no other cities in the state that I'm aware of that have this sophistication. So again, kind of the stars have to align, but it's definitely worth taking a look at.
Kim, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Does this database also include the driving through the red light camera kind of tickets, or is this just...
I would say that it would if it was issued by Seattle Police Department. I would think so, yeah. I haven't tested at that, so, but I would think so because it's an infraction through Seattle Municipal Court, so I would think it would be there.
Maybe should she search you?
Possibly, I don't know what she
And then I'll just mention just a shout out, you guys probably already know about this, but Google Scholar is an awesome resource for case law. Again, if Westlaw and Lexis blows up or you're working with someone who doesn't have access to that, Google Scholar is an awesome resource for 50 state case law, federal. They even have the federal supplement coverage about 1950 on, except for the U.S. Supreme Court, which goes much farther back. But keep in mind Google Scholar if you don't have access to your other standard paid databases. Now, a couple of things on businesses. What I usually start with is the Secretary of State for the company, for the state that I am looking the business for. But remember that businesses don't have to be incorporated in the state that they operate in. In fact, if you do a search in your state department of there's your corporation's database and you don't find anything, check Delaware. Delaware is known as a corporation-friendly state, and they do a lot of corporation registering. Unfortunately, sometimes people will use things like third-party registration company, and then you can't get any farther, which is a little annoying. But that's a little tip. So if you can't find it within your home state, check Delaware. Now, Washington uses a unique identifier called a UBI number. And if you have a UBI number for a company, you want to write that down because a lot of companies have very similar names, but their UBI number is consistent across all the different state agencies. So for example, in the Department of Labor and Industries, which has a really powerful website, and I'm sure other states have things that are very similar, with the UBI number, we can find actually a great deal of information. So the gentleman, Samuel R.B. Harris, worked for actually, I'm going to use a different search than the one that I had planned, and hopefully this won't blow up on me. Green Tea Plumbing. He founded a company called Green Tea Plumbing. Now, what was interesting is that it had an address. And I know that this is his correct address because I was preparing him as the subject for a class that I was teaching that included investigators from the Washington Department of Revenue. And I had them come visit me at the library, and I'm working through this sample, and they were all excited. And they said, "How did you pick this guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just heard about him on the news." And the lady said, "I filed that lawsuit against him, the one that's listed down here at the bottom of the page." She said, "I filed that lawsuit against him. How coincidental that you just happened to pick somebody." And she was able to confirm that that was indeed the correct address. So that's a tip. When you're thinking, okay, bust on the voter database, that's old. Where would they want to be sure that they had a good address? If they're involved in litigation, they want to be sure that they have a good address with the courts. If they're licensed, they want to be sure that that agency has a good address for them. So you have to kind of think, where's the most important place that they're going to be sure that they keep their address up to date? And for him as a contractor, keeping his address with L&I was obviously really important, even though he let it lapse and he got in trouble and now he's in jail. This got me a lot of good information. So that's that. Okay, so now this is about vehicles. So now we've got a plate number, and let's say you needed a VIN number because there are some databases out there that are like stolen vehicle databases, and you need a VIN number in order to search them. You say, well, how do I get a VIN number? Well, if you put the plate number right there, there's the VIN number, there's a report for emissions, and you can even go so far as to figure out which station that report was taken at. And there's a little handy legend that tells you which station goes with which station number. Now that could help you. I mean, there's no guarantee that the owner of the car happened to live in the same city where they got the emissions test done, but it would stand to reason that it's probably close by. So again, if you're trying to narrow down your search, knowing where someone got their emissions test done And the fact that they're still getting it done every 2 years, that's another thing to know. Okay, they got it done recently, probably still driving that car. And if you were working with a private investigator, you would know details about the car, like the color, all of that stuff that you could give to them if they were going to go do in-person surveillance. Okay, so the last bit we're going to talk about some social media. Now, a lot of people use Facebook. What you might not realize is how incredibly powerful Facebook has now made this graph searching. And we played around with the graph searching on Facebook. Oh, I love showing things that people haven't seen before. It makes me so excited. Okay. It used to be you would just, type the name of a person that you were looking for, but it's gotten way more sophisticated. So let's say you found a name out there, say like a Yelp reviewer. Yelp bios have a ton of stuff. I found this lady named Trish Ann C. She said she was from Seattle. She likes photography and has a photography website. So I went on to Facebook and I said, women who live in Seattle, Washington. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I forgot. Women, but I don't know her last name. Trish Ann, who live in Seattle, Washington, and like photography. There we go. There she is. So we've used. So it's that now. Okay, you have to know how Facebook structures. It's not like a Boolean search where you can just start chucking stuff in there. You have to do it just so. You have to structure it just so. But if you figure it out, we're just mining the information she's made public. We know her name, we know where she lives, and that she likes photography. And there she is. But you can also use this. So say you found a subject who hides their photos or their friend, which a lot of people do. So here as an example, if I say photos, photos by Kim Ositis, this is only going to show photos that I've taken. And so let's say you've looked for the person and they've hide their photos. You can't see them. But if you change this to photos of Kim Ositis, you're now looking for any photo that I've taken plus any photo where I've been tagged by somebody else. So that's a way you can get around people's privacy protections. You can also start to put together things like people who are friends of X and Y. That can help you find relationships. And then there's additional refining you can do over here where you can say, where was it taken, when was it taken, who commented on it, who liked it. So there are very, very sophisticated searching tools within Facebook, and some of them you can use to, again, kind of work around people's privacy restrictions. Another thing you can do, which is pretty darn cool, is you can search by hashtag. Now this gentleman that I just taught for 4 hours on Wednesday at a DSHS Office of Fraud Accountability training on social media. And I showed him this search. There's this guy that I've been sleuthing, not stalking, whose name is Sean Banerjee. Now on his Instagram profile, it's private, I can't see his posts, but in his profile, he included a custom hashtag that he'd come up with himself called Banerjist. Now, anytime you see something that's so unique to an individual, write that puppy down. You're going to use it to search in other places. Facebook allows you to search by hashtag now, so when I do a search on Banerjist, I get one hit. And there, guys, my guy, Sean Banerjee, being tagged by someone else using his unique hashtag. If I go in and I look at Stacey Ann, she doesn't share her friends, but she shares her followers. And don't you know, one of her followers happens to be Sean's dad. One of his followers happens to be Sean's mom. and I know this. Oh, there she is. Because the profile picture, that's him right there.
Go back one screen.
Sure.
Again, because it looked like there was a Sean Banerjee to the left of her.
Well, yeah, that would be one of his friends. But see, I couldn't make the link from Sean to his parents because he hid his friends. So I'm working, so you can, if someone hides their friends, you have to kind of friend by friend rebuild their friend list by going around it because you can't see it directly. So you have to look at where the connections are. So that's a technique. I'm gonna keep moving. I think my next slide is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is something you need to be really careful of if you're using it as an investigator, because you may not realize that, like with most of this social media stuff, the default is openness. They want you to be open. They want you to share. You may say, I don't feel like sharing. So you go under, you log back in because it logged you out. So you go under privacy and you say, select what others see when you viewed their profile. The default recommended is if I view somebody's profile, they will see my name and my picture. An investigator, not so much. So you need to change that and you need to check that, because if you're using your own profile to go out and sleuth people, they'll know. Now, the flip side of this is that because I've selected to be completely anonymous, I can't tell who's viewed my own profile. So there's kind of that give and take. LinkedIn is like, okay, fine, I'll let you be anonymous, but then you can't tell who's looking at you. So that's the give and take with LinkedIn. Next up. Okay, so now let's talk about things like usernames. Usernames are very powerful because a couple of things. People are lazy. They pick a username when they really like it and they don't want to change. They're going to use that same username website to website. You can also sometimes take someone's email address, and if it's a personal email address, it's not going to work so much with a work one. You'll lop off the @ whatever and search on just the first part of the email address, and sometimes you can pop on things on that. This is Topsy. It searches across a lot of different things, including specifically Twitter. Now, Twitter has an advanced search page. When I do my search that I'm going to show you in a bit, I only get one hit. And this is the search that I'm going to do. I know this is Will Wheaton of Stand By Me fame. And he's tweeting about the hashtag beer. And we see that in the past 27 days, a bunch of people have tweeted. Now, this is the key thing, is that these are all of retweets and his own tweets. But if you say, I only want to see stuff that he's written, you go under the advanced search and you limit it to @Will Wheaton, specifically with this word, beer. And now we are much more limited to just his tweets. And this goes all the way back, to the beginning of Twitter, which is like 2006. And the advanced search that's built into Twitter does not go back that far. So you can use this to do a lot of powerful things. If you're following someone and you're like, oh, they talked about that one thing, but I don't want to have to scroll through, months and years of Twitter posts, this allows you to search. Or if somebody says, well, I couldn't have done X whatever because I was over here. And then you can look back by time and you can say, well, they were lying because they posted about being at this one place at this one time. I can tell that because I could look at their tweets when I searched it by a topic. So, and if we change it to everything, as it starts to bring in YouTube, it's really powerful. And this is just one of the social searches that are out there. There's a number of them. I like this one because it's not as restrictive on date. It purports to go all the way back to the beginning. And did you know that the Library of Congress is cataloging every public tweet since the very first one? Yeah, so we'll know what people had for lunch for centuries in the future. But social media can be, this sleuthing is like the next step. This and images. I have professional tips. Here's my professional tip. I didn't really do much in the reverse image searching, but it's very powerful. You have to be careful when you're doing pictures because pictures stay around. Even if you closed your Facebook post, anything that wasn't private has been scraped and is living on multiple servers out there. This is also a cautionary tale on usernames and adult websites. So let's say you frequent adult websites. You can do whatever you want with your private time. I don't care. Don't create profiles on adult websites. That's number one. And if you are, pick some username that you don't use anywhere else. Anywhere else. Don't use your picture. That's you. Don't use the same picture, that's you, on that adult-oriented website that you also use on your Google Plus profile with your real name. And I wish I could tell you this was a hypothetical. It is not. Yeah, my computer needed, a blessing after that. It was traumatized. So you have to be really careful because pictures, they have a lot of data attached to it that you can't see. Things like geolocation, tagging, the date the picture was taken, the type of camera it was taken on. All of those things can be gleaned and then they can be used by folks like me. So you have to be careful. So that's one of my cautionary tales. Okay. Now, I mentioned a lot of Washington stuff. But you say, Kim, I don't live in Washington. That's okay. Because this is a website called blackbookonline.info, which is one of my favorite sites. I was asked to go to New Jersey a couple of years ago to teach skip tracing, and I didn't know that much about New Jersey besides Snooki, and I figured there's got to be more. So I pulled up New Jersey, and I said, view all New Jersey records. And the thing I love about this site is that, yes, there are ads, but there's actual, real, honest-to-goodness, useful information. Because if you've ever done things, like California Public Records, it's endless circles of websites, but never the actual website where you can actually put a search in. This has actual websites that are linked. Oh my gosh. And they tell you what coverage is, whether it's state, county, city, who provides the data. You can report a broken link, you can vote on it, and it takes you to an actual thing. My favorite that I found was the casino exclusion list with pictures. Oh, it was good fun. So this is an excellent resource if you need to move outside of an area that you're not familiar with. Same idea is pibuzz.com. This is maintained by a private investigator called Tamara Thompson down in California, and she puts together all sorts of stuff. She was the one who turned me on to this idea of using Yelp profiles to figure out to do sleuthing on people, because the amount of information that they include you can use in a lot of different places. But she has all of these favorite links, and she has a whole separate website that catalogs all of her favorite links. And she's the one that you can read about, what's the new way to search LinkedIn or something like that. So it's an excellent way to get to stay up on what's the newest open source sleuthing thing. She also has a very comprehensive list of government databases, things like government employees, government salaries, that kind of thing. So it's an excellent resource, and I'm out of time. It's 5 o'clock. So questions? No questions? Okay. Yes, go ahead. I don't do any, I've thought about it, but I haven't. The question was, do I do any consulting as a professional, or do I just teach? Right now I just teach. I've thought about it, but I haven't figured out a way that would allow me to keep my job and do it on the side. There are a lot of people who do this kind of stuff as a profession, but right now I just teach it, and other people. And I have to share my final anecdote. A couple of years ago, I was teaching to a group of attorneys at a CLE, and a gentleman came up afterwards, and he said, "Kim, you are the scariest person I have ever met." And I said, thank you, because obviously I look incredibly threatening, but don't piss me off because I know where you live. So, thank you very much.